Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Aneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Pakistan's National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf says India is using the Afghan soil for terrorism in his country. In an interview to an Indian journalist, Yusuf said India is involved in terror attacks in Pakistan, including the recent Lahore blast. On Afghanistan, Yusuf said Pakistan has no favorites and the Afghans have right to choose their own government. Meanwhile, Indian forces have martyred two more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were targeted during an operation in the Sumlar area of Bandipora district. Israeli forces have killed a Palestinian teenager and injured 320 others in the occupied West Bank. The Palestine Red Crescent Society says occupation forces used tear gas, live fire and rubber-coated bullets. Hundreds had gathered to protest in multiple towns and cities against the illegal Israeli settlements. Brazil has reported 1,300 new COVID-19 deaths and over 100,000 new cases in a single day. In Pakistan, the virus has claimed 32 more lives and infected over 1,800 people overnight. Globally, there are more than 4.1 million fatalities and 193 million cases so far. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from Pakistan, where the National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf says India is using the Afghan soil for terrorism in his country. In an interview to an Indian journalist, Yusuf said India is involved in terror attacks in Pakistan, including the recent Lahore blast. He said India has to make conducive environment for dialogue. On Afghanistan, Yusuf said Pakistan has no favorites and the Afghans have the right to choose their own government. To a question, he said Pakistan will seal the border with Afghanistan if the Taliban take over Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Pakistan says no amount of Indian propaganda can undermine the significance of the China-Pakistan economic corridor for regional prosperity. Responding to media queries, a Foreign Office spokesperson said the flagship project promises socio-economic uplift and regional connectivity. He also said India's role as a spoiler in Afghanistan is well established. He stressed that India's baseless allegations cannot divert attention from human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. The spokesperson also told India to stop peddling malicious propaganda and focus on course correction. Indian forces have martyred two more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were targeted during an operation in Bandipora Sumlar area. Occupation forces have blocked all entry and exit points of the area. The operation was going on till the last reports came in. The Indian troops have martyred over 400 civilians since New Delhi revoked Kashmir's statehood in August 2019. Now, the US and Afghan presidents agree that the Taliban's offensive contradicts their claim of supporting a negotiated peace deal. In a statement, the White House said Joe Biden assured Ashraf Ghani of diplomatic and humanitarian support to Kabul. President Biden also reaffirmed Washington's continued support to the Afghan military. He urged more work for unity among Afghan leaders for the country's peace and security. The two sides deplored the loss of Afghan lives as well as displacement of the civilian population. The White House says Congress has been requested to approve a $3.3 billion military aid for Kabul in 2022 defense budget. Pakistan says it has deployed armed forces at the frontline positions along the border with Afghanistan. Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid Ahmed said the influx of refugees and entry of armed militants need to be contained. He said it is time that Afghan politicians and their military leadership learn to deal with issues. Talking to the media, Ahmed said the fight in Afghanistan is its internal matter. He added Pakistan is not taking any side and has no favourites. There are two key crossings between Pakistan and Afghanistan apart from several small trading points. Pakistan has already fenced about 90% of the border with Afghanistan. Moving on, Israeli forces have killed a Palestinian teenager and injured 320 others in the occupied West Bank. Hundreds had gathered to protest in multiple towns and cities against illegal Israeli settlements. The Health Ministry says Mohammed Tamimi was killed in Nabi Saleh village northwest of Ramallah. The Palestine Red Crescent Society says occupation forces used tear gas, live fire and rubber-coated bullets. Meanwhile, the Israeli army says 2 soldiers were slightly injured in the clashes. About 475,000 Jewish settlers now live in the occupied West Bank, which Israel has occupied since 1967. Now, in Iraq's Kurdistan region, a drone attack has been carried out on a military base that hosts American troops. The US-led coalition said that no casualties or damage has been reported. The attack comes ahead of Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi's expected meeting with the US President Joe Biden in Washington. The two are set to discuss a possible full troop withdrawal. The US still has around 2,500 troops in Iraq to fight ISIS. Most of the American troops deployed in the coalition were withdrawn under former US President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Brazil has reported 1,300 new COVID-19 deaths and whopping 100,000 new cases in a single day. Globally, there are more than 4.1 million fatalities and 193 million cases so far.
Pfizer says the U.S. government has purchased 200 million additional doses to help with pediatric vaccination. Sydney will get 50,000 more doses of the vaccine this week to battle its worsening outbreak. Meanwhile, China has reported 35 new COVID-19 cases in the mainland, down from 48 cases a day earlier. Vietnam is extending a lockdown in Ho Chi Minh City until August 1st and imposing stricter restrictions in the capital, Hanoi. In Japan, Olympics organizers say one more athlete at the Tokyo Games had tested positive for COVID-19. They say Olympics-related cases rose by 17, bringing the total number of disclosed cases to 123. And in Europe, Germany is classifying Spain and the Netherlands as areas with a high incidence of coronavirus. Unvaccinated travelers returning from those countries will have to quarantine for at least 5 days.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 32 deaths from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the virus has claimed nearly 23,000 lives so far. It says more than 1,800 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The country's positivity rate has declined to 4.89%. Pakistan has reported more than 1 million cases so far, with over 924,000 recoveries. There are around 54,000 active cases, of which more than 2,500 are in critical condition. In India, the death toll from landslides and flooding in the western state of Maharashtra has risen to 136. Torrential monsoon rains have also cut off hundreds of villages. Officials say 35 people were injured in rain-triggered landslides in 6 regions in Raigad district. The district collector said around 50 people are fear trapped under the debris. Rescue crews have been racing to evacuate survivors. The country's weather agency says more heavy rains will continue to lash the state capital, Mumbai. The French Parliament has approved a bill that is widely criticized as xenophobic and Islamophobic. The so-called anti-separatist bill was approved by 49 votes to 19 with 5 abstentions. Far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon railed against the law and called it anti-Muslim. He also introduced a motion to reject the bill, but it was opposed by the lawmakers. In a series of tweets, he said the provision would have risked distorting the French conception of secularism. The bill may have to pass the final hurdle of the Constitutional Council before becoming a law. Now, the US and Russia have announced that their diplomats will hold talks on nuclear arms control on July 28th. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman will travel to Geneva to lead the American delegation. The State Department says this meeting follows up on a commitment made between the U.S. and Russian presidents. It said the two had agreed on a robust dialogue to lay the groundwork for future arms control and risk reduction measures. Moscow said Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov will head Russia's team. Ryabkov said his side plans to discuss all aspects of the strategic stability and prospects for arms control. Now, China has imposed counter-sanctions on 7 U.S. individuals, including former Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. The retaliatory curbs are the first imposed by Beijing under its new anti-foreign sanction law. Beijing's foreign ministry said the U.S. concocted the Hong Kong Business Advisory to smear the territory's business environment. It noted Washington's curbs violate international laws. The ministry reiterated that any interference in Hong Kong's affairs will be futile. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the U.S. is undeterred by Beijing's actions. She said China's move illustrated the very risks about which the U.S. government had warned. Now, Britain says Myanmar's military has appointed a new temporary head of its embassy in London. In a statement, the British Foreign Ministry said it had been notified of the move. The ministry said the selection of the new envoy did not require the consent of the British government, but the rights group has urged London not to recognise the interim representative appointed by the military. In a statement, the Accountability Project said it would be a gross double standard and a morale outrage. Myanmar's former envoy was locked out of the London embassy in April after calling for the release of their elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Turkey has rejected the UN Security Council statement over the reopening of the disputed Cyprus resort. The Foreign Ministry says such remarks are based on black propaganda by Athens and Greek Cypriots. In a statement, the ministry said Maros is part of Turkish Cyprus and has not been opened to settlement. It said Turkish Cyprus had declared the city a military zone as a goodwill gesture. It assured that Ankara's decisions respect property rights and are in full compliance with international law. The ministry said, contrary to claims, the relevant UN Security Council resolutions are not violated. Disputed Varosha has remained empty since August 1974, sealed off with barbed wire and no entry signs. Now, G20 energy and environment ministers have failed to reach a deal on climate targets. Italy's Minister Roberto Cingolani said there was a disagreement on the wording of key commitments in communique. Talking to the media, he said the ministers could not agree mainly on 2 issues. One was phasing out coal power, which most countries wanted to achieve by 2025, but some said it would be impossible for them. The other concerned limiting global temperature increase to 1.52 degrees Celsius. Cingolani said the disputed issues will be raised in the Heads of State meeting in October. The failure to agree to common language is seen as a setback ahead of UN climate talks in November. Now, Russia has asked Japan to fix the world map of Tokyo Olympics 2020 that shows Crimea as part of the Ukraine. The Russian embassy to Japan said Crimea reunited with Russia after the 2014 referendum. In a Facebook post, the embassy said the referendum fully complied with international standards. It said Crimea is an inalienable part of Russia. The embassy called on the International Olympic Committee and the Tokyo Olympics Committee to correct the map. Meanwhile, in eastern Russia, a suspension bridge collapsed as a truck tried to drive across during severe floods. The bridge, made out of wood, was located in Urim village. As the truck reached the middle of the bridge, it started failing under the load. The driver was later reported to have survived, but the truck could not be recovered from the water. The suspension bridge was constructed in place of a road bridge that was destroyed in previous floods. Currently, the residents of PERUVIAN village do not have a way to cross the river after the accident. Now in Peru, climbers have scaled the mighty HUASCARAN mountain to unfurl a massive flag near its peak. The group says the aim was to show unity in the politically divided country. Details in this report.
At 6,768 meters, HUASCARAN in Peru's high summit, located in the province of Yangui, climbers battle thick snow and thin air to reach the top. And to make their feat even more difficult, more than 20 climbers helped carry towards the summit a massive Peruvian flag.
Never has this challenge project been done before, to take a flag that is 200 meters and which weighs 400 kilos to the most important peak in Peru, the HUASCARAN.
The flag was unfurled on the HUASCARAN mountain on July 12th, in time for the country's bicentenary celebrations on July 28th. Victor Rimac helped organize this expedition, hoping to unite the country after divisive presidential elections.
We started a project called Flag for the Bicentenary. This project commemorates 200 years of the country and for us to be able to unite Peru because the political situation has divided us a lot. So with this project, we have tried to unite Peruvians and send out a message of fellowship and hope.
The spectacular Mount HUASCARAN is named after the 16th century Inca leader Huasca. The ascent normally takes 21 days.
And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.